This video was made possible by Skillshare. Learn new skills for free for 2 months at skl.sh/HAI24. America is really good at being number one in number of things. It ranks top in quantity of Waffle Houses, Walmarts, moon landings, American Civil War victories, Americans, but one thing that it does not have more than anyone else of is cruise ships. That's because there is only one sole cruise ship based in the US. Now, for the purposes of arbitrarity, when I'm talking about cruise ships, I'm talking about one of those big boy ocean ships that carry thousands of people, not one of those low tier ships that go on rivers or lakes or stuff like that. In that category, this ship, the aptly named Pride of America, is the only American-flagged, American-based cruise ship. Now, to that you might ask, huh? You see, the reason this is because of a little thing I like to call the law. On board ships, the laws of the country in which they are registered apply. That is to say, if you're on an American flagged ship, you can't drink till 21, if you're on a Singaporean flagged ship, chewing gum is illegal, and if you're on a British flagged ship, you're allowed to invade and annex any country you want for recreational purposes. Trust me, I'm a lawyer. But what that also means is that those boring kind of laws doing silly things like protecting employee rights and preventing labor exploitation also apply. Of course, in the US, one of those labor laws is the minimum wage, which is $7.25 an hour, enough to buy an avocado cracker in San Francisco. But surprisingly, United States law does not apply in the rest of the world. In Panama, for example, the minimum wage for ship workers is $2.32 an hour, so let's say, and hear me out here, we take a ship, register it in Panama, and pay people $2.32 an hour. Genius, you're hired, says the cruise industry, because that's exactly what they do. Considering cruise companies pay for their employees' food and housing abroad, they're able to hire labor from low-wage countries, and because they typically register the ships in places with low or no minimum wage like Panama, Singapore, or Liberia, they're legally allowed to pay them very little. Those workers are allowed to work on the ship no matter where it sails, since, for all intents and purposes, it's the territory of the country in which it's registered. But there's one major exception for the extra special Gold Star country that is the United States. You see, the US has a law known as the Jones Act, but that is officially titled the Merchant Marine Act of 1920. Believe it or not, this law, passed in 1920, is possibly a tiny bit antiquated. Not that this is a political video or anything. It stipulates that, in order to transport goods or passengers between ports in the US, a ship must be American-built, American-crewed, and American-flagged. Now, if this were a political video, I might say something like, this significantly increases the cost of transporting goods between US ports and therefore raises the cost of living in isolated regions of the US like Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico, but of course this is not a political video, so I won't say that. Working on a US-flagged vessel also requires the right to work in the US, which is not easy to get in comparison to the right to work in a place like Panama, which makes sure regulations are easy for its registered ships, since ship registration is big business for them. Now, these laws all also apply to cruise ships, since, technically, when a cruise sails between US ports, it's transporting passengers between US ports. This presents a problem for the cruise industry, which simultaneously wants to build and register their ships outside the US and also cruise to places like Alaska and Hawaii. They figured out two unique solutions though. One is to sail to the US from not the US. Cruise ships are allowed to sail between multiple US ports if they start outside the US, as long as everybody gets back on the ship. That way nobody's getting transported between US ports, they're just stopping off. Therefore, a lot of cruises to Alaska start in one of the not yet United States of America, Canada. The other solution, though, that exempts the ships from the Jones Act is to make a stop outside the US. That's why most every Alaskan cruise leaving from Seattle stops in Victoria, British Columbia. They usually make sure the American passengers aren't too distressed though by keeping the stop to only a few hours rather than the typical full day. Now, that works fine for Alaska cruises, but what about Hawaii? If a cruise is going from the US West Coast to Hawaii and back to the West Coast, they'll typically make a stop in Ensenada, Mexico, even though that adds up to 2 days for a round-trip Hawaii cruise from San Francisco. If a ship wants to do a cruise exclusively around Hawaii though, there's really no foreign country nearby that they can stop in. That's why there are basically no cruises around the islands round-trip from Honolulu, except for one. Norwegian Cruise Line, persuaded by the potential of an all-Hawaii cruise and a huge amount of federal subsidies, went through the enormous expense of building a cruise ship mostly in America for the first time in a while, registering it in America, and crewing it with Americans. This ship, the Pride of America, is now the only full-size American cruise ship, and it is also the only cruise ship making trips exclusively around the Hawaiian Islands. Of course, American labor is not cheap, and so the 7-night trip on the Pride of America starts at $1,200, exactly triple as much as their 7-night cruise from Alaska to Seattle via Vancouver. Of course, rule number 1 of cruising is that the Wi-Fi is expensive and sucks. That's why, before you go, you should download one of Skillshare's 25,000 classes on their iOS or Android app for some aquatic skill acquisition. One course that I might recommend for anyone taking a trip this summer, cruise or not, is their one on iPhone photography. It teaches all about composition, lighting, and other tips for mobile photography that can really spice up the photos even from the device you hold in your pocket. Of course, there are more than 25,000 other courses to take after or instead of this one, all of which you can have unlimited access to for free for 2 months only by signing up at skl.sh/HAI24, and you'll be supporting HAI while you're at it.